Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is January 25th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface. I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. And it's nice to be back doing a podcast. I had to take a couple of days off and actually had a great interview with Brad Olson. That was my last podcast. So if folks haven't had a chance to listen to that, it was a fascinating interview. I know I got great feedback from those of you who did listen to it. Brad was just an amazing guest and has just so much knowledge, so much information on so many different subjects. And we talked about, wow, lots of different things. I mean, so many more things than I even anticipated. And that's really the indication to me of a great conversation. You start off thinking you're going to talk about X, Y, and Z, and then you end up talking about the entire alphabet. Or at least it seemed as if, I mean, we got into Antarctica, of course, like I mentioned. We got into MK Ultra. We got into non-terrestrials. We got into a whole bunch of information about Solar Warden and secret space program. So again, if you haven't checked out that video, please go and do so. And I'm certainly going to be getting Brad back for a follow-up interview, hopefully sometime in the near future. And of course, I have my 7th interview with Decode coming up on Monday. So I'm very, very excited about that. I always get excited for my conversations with Gene, and I know the audience absolutely loves Gene. So it's going to be a great, great show, I'm sure. So very exciting things going on in terms of the channel. But, you know, sometimes, folks, it doesn't hurt to take a couple of days off. I mean, I know this is something that people have talked about on various different channels. I've heard it mentioned how important it is. And I think I've talked about it as well, how important it is sometimes to give yourself a license to kind of step away from all the chaos, step away from all the news, all the bombardment of the information. Sure, you know, check the news maybe a few times a day, but, you know, don't allow yourself to get completely inundated to the point where, you know, it drags your spirit down and drags your vibration down. And I got to be honest with you, folks, that happens to me quite a bit in this journey because, you know, I get so wrapped up in the information and trying to make sense out of everything and all of this stuff coming at me that eventually what ends up happening is it starts to just wear down my spirit. It starts to wear me down. I start to get tired. I start to, you know, not get enough sleep and all of this type of stuff. And after a while, you really do need to take a break. And I'm glad that I did, especially, you know, with all this stuff going on between Lynn Wood and General Flynn. Of course, this is a story that just doesn't seem to want to go away. And, you know, everybody is out there feeling as if, you know, they've got to take sides, pick one over the other. And, you know, to some extent, I kind of fell into that trap a little bit. You know, I was listening to information on Michael Jaco's channel coming out and, you know, some of the stuff that Lynn Wood was saying. And I thought, well, you know, it's not looking too good here for General Flynn. But I got to be honest, folks, there was this gnawing feeling inside of me that it just didn't agree with what I actually felt about both of these guys. You know, I look at General Flynn as a hero. And quite frankly, I look at Lynn Wood as a hero. I mean, both of these guys have done such amazing, amazing things for the Patriot cause, albeit it maybe in different ways and emphasizing different things. I mean, that definitely happens. I mean, Lynn Wood spends so much of his time dedicated to talking about the children and saving the children and what's actually going on, the real epidemic in the world. And that's really the number one thing that the cabal has always tried to cover up. That's what they have the mainstream media do, is constantly trying to cover up this issue, which is the biggest issue in the world. It's the biggest issue that humanity faces. I mean, and I know that I don't need to convince the audience of that, but sometimes it helps to have a reminder. If you go and you look at a graph of how many people go missing every year, your jaw will literally hang open, especially when you consider how it is possible that so few people even know about this. Well, of course, we all understand the reasons for that, but I'm talking here more, you know, about your average person. I mean, if you walk up to the average person who's not awake and you said to them, do you have any idea how many people go missing every single year in the United States alone, let alone worldwide? They probably say, oh, no, I don't know. You know? And then you proceed to explain to them that north of 800,000 people to over 1 million people every single year in the United States alone go missing. And why is it that that never gets talked about? Again, talking to the average person, they'll probably scratch their head and go, I don't know. Wow, really? And then they'll probably call you a conspiracy theorist because, the mainstream media isn't reporting on it. But that's really the whole point. The mainstream media, their number one goal, aside from, of course, deflecting our attention from other topics, their number one goal is to keep our attention away from anything having to do with children being abducted or people in general being abducted. Certainly everything having to do with pedophilia. I mean, they cover that stuff up. You never, ever hear them talking about that on the mainstream news. And that's why so many people out there, your average person out there, doesn't understand that this is the epidemic that it is. Why? Because it doesn't get reported. And then, of course, conversely, you take something fake like the virus, and everybody is just absolutely terrified of what in essence, for most people, amounts to the common cold or perhaps a severe bout of the flu. And to be honest, folks, I'm not really sure 100% where I stand on the fundamental question of whether or not it even exists, like David Icke says. And, you look at the different court cases around the world, and the state has been unable to show any kind of proof that this exists. They haven't been able to isolate it. They haven't been able to come forward and say, here it is. Even when they've been given like a year to do it, which I think was the case I think it was in Canada. I can't remember if it was in Canada or Spain, but this has happened in different places across the world. I think it was Canada was the most recent one. And so I don't know. Does it even exist? But then, of course, I think, okay, well, maybe it doesn't exist. But then there's all the other information that's coming out about the Wuhan lab and all the gain of function research and the Project Veritas reports and Dr. Malone and everyone coming forward and saying, look, you see, all this stuff was going on. Fauci was directly involved. They were looking at ways to make these viruses more lethal, to make them more transmissible, on and on and on. So if that was going on, then, it's very likely that they did cook something up. And, who knows? Maybe the state doesn't want to produce it for some reason. Maybe they're willing to lose in court because it's not really tactically important to them. I don't know. But again, it's just another one of the myriad of issues out there that are just so confusing to navigate and almost impossible to know the truth. 100%. There's that. And then, getting back to the feud between Lynn and Flynn, we'll just say, how do you know who's telling the truth here? And is it necessarily that simple? Is it possible that this is some kind of a white hat operation? Absolutely. I was listening to Charlie Ward, who suggested that this was actually a black hat operation that the white hats became aware of and decided to allow it to play out so that they could flush out all of the plastic patriots or the faux patriots out there, the PAY patriots, who he says have been given money by the deep state or the cabal to infiltrate the patriot movement and to specifically go after people like, high profile people who are a real genuine threat, like General Flynn and those in his orbit, I guess you could say. And that the white hats, they knew that the black hats had cooked up this plan to infiltrate the patriot movement. And they knew who they were targeting, who essentially they were told to go after. So in order to flush these people out, it sounded like to me, like Charlie was suggesting, that this thing between Lynn Wood and General Flynn and all these other people was cooked up or somehow manipulated by the white hats to be able to flush these infiltrators out. So again, who knows? Is that what's going on here? Is it one over the other? Is it necessarily a binary choice, like, yes or no, or on or off? Like, you have to really pick sides here? I don't think so. I mean, I'm honest with people about where I am on any given issue on any given day. And I'm comfortable enough within myself that if I change my opinion for the right reasons, and that basically just means that it's genuine and I'm not doing it for any, contrived purpose, and that's just not who I am, then I'm okay with that, because I understand that through this process, I'm supposed to grow. And growth always involves change, and it always involves being wrong and having to rethink things and having to struggle and get frustrated and on and on and on. I accept that. That's okay. And so, if, on any given day, I'll tell you the way I really feel. I mean, I told you a couple weeks ago, I think it was now, that I was kind of, feeling myself sort of inch in the direction of, maybe Linwood's telling the truth here. But at the same time, like I just talked about, there was this gnawing feeling inside of me like it wasn't that simple. And then I just, my spirit wasn't that willing to just simply dismiss General Flynn after all the amazing things that he's done and all the incredible hardships that he's had to go through. Now, people could say that it's staged. People could say that he's MK Ultra. People could say all different types of things. And I mean, they're going to say all different types of things. That's just it. We're going to continue to get bombarded with this constant propaganda, constant, well, really intel, but also mixed in with disinformation, like we've talked about, to the point where it really scrambles your brain sometimes. But I don't really think that it has to be just like, in the Matrix, like where Neo works, he worked at the Binary Corporation. I think that was put in there on purpose in order to get us to kind of pay attention to that concept. What does that really mean? Well, binary is, a system set up with opposites. One choice over another. And binary code is, ones and zeros. It's the computer language that runs this world and really runs the Matrix. And how they set this whole thing up, well, I'm still doing more research into that. I'm going to talk to Gene more about it on our next interview. But essentially what they did, they being negative agenda non-terrestrials, when they came to this planet and saw that it was harmonious and saw the sacred geometry and realized that the poles were perfectly neutral and balanced, they knew that they couldn't inhabit this planet because they're low frequency demons. Well, maybe not technically demons, but Gene can speak on that. But they're evil, low density beings. And so in order for them to even inhabit this planet, they needed to cause the environment to change, the energy on the planet to change, the frequency to change. And so in order to do that, they had to invert the sacred geometry. They had to create a magnetism in the poles where at one point they were neutral, to create this binary environment. Why did they do that? Well, what's their primary objective, folks? It's always been divide, 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 divide. And the best way to do that is to set up a system that's based on opposites, to predetermine the choices to present us with so that they could control the outcome, and therefore they control us. And all the while giving us the illusion, of course, that we have free will, that we're living in some sort of a free country or a free world. When in reality, not only are we slaves, but we're programmed to not even think that we are slaves, to not even consider that as an idea until somebody else presents it to us after we've reached a certain point and we're finally ready for that red pill. But for most folks, you spend most of your life not even realizing that you are trapped inside of this matrix, in this binary system that teaches you to think a certain way, that basically restricts your thinking to left or right, up or down, yes or no, choose a side, choose a side, choose a side, divide, divide, divide. It's the best way to delineate one from another, is to present a binary choice. So I think that was symbolic. I think that was put in there for a reason. And the Great Awakening itself, in my view, is the transcendence of that binary way of thinking, that three-dimensional way of seeing everything. Now, like with Linwood and General Flynn, I have to choose one or the other. And you can see how it's playing out in the Patriot community. Even myself, I kind of got wrapped up in this as well. You get caught up in the weeds and you put invest all this emotional energy into trying to figure out who's telling the truth. The ego wants to come up with an answer, even though that answer doesn't really satisfy the spirit. And so somebody who's transcended to the fifth dimension, or ascended, I should say, to the fifth dimension, or is in the process, can reserve that judgment and realize that what's being presented is perhaps a choice that doesn't really satisfy the reality as you perceive it to be. And so you're transcending that binary way of thinking, like I have to choose one side or another, and starting to realize that perhaps there are, and indeed I do believe there are, much bigger things at play here. Now, maybe I'm overthinking this issue, and maybe it could just be a matter of one being right and the other being wrong, and maybe that's the case. Like I've said, maybe it is true that either one of these guys isn't who we think they are. But honestly, for me, that's a stretch. Because in my mind, they've done so much good, like I said, and they've gone through so much. I mean, Lin Wood is a lion. He goes toe-to-toe. I mean, whether it's real or whether it's not real, he goes toe-to-toe with whoever he perceives to be his opposition or his enemy. And he does not back down. And there are really not too many people who have that quality. And like I've talked about many times, you can fake a lot of things, but faking passion is not an easy thing to do. And Lin Wood just has passion oozing out of him. And as a passionate person myself, I can recognize it instantly and resonate with it instantly. So for me to believe that this guy's a bad guy, well, it's just based on what I got right now, folks, it's a bridge too far. And to be honest, I feel the same way about General Flynn. Now, I've never had the same sort of passionate response that I've had with Lin Wood when I listen to General Flynn, but I've always had an amazing amount of respect for the man. And I've always believed him to be a staunch patriot and a leader. And I still believe that he is, because again, you judge a tree by its fruit. You look at the whole picture. I mean, none of us are perfect. We all have a past. We all have things that could be called into question. Narratives can be created about anybody's life. So until we get all the facts, I mean, I think, you got to give a guy like General Flynn the benefit of the doubt. I mean, if you're not going to give Flynn the benefit of the doubt, who are you going to give the benefit of the doubt to? So, that's really where I stand on it. I mean, I kind of consider myself to be neutral. And not only that, but just I think that something bigger is going on here. I think Charlie may be very well giving us an accurate description of what's happening. This is a white hat operation overall that's being used to kind of root out all of these people who are just jumping on the bandwagon, seemingly, and attacking General Flynn and joining the ranks of Lin Wood and kind of seemingly creating this division. There's that word again, within the Patriot community, because they want us to stay trapped in that way of thinking. And so regardless of who's running this, if it's the good guys, the bad guys, if it's the bad guys, they want us to stay trapped inside that three-dimensional thinking, that binary thinking. If it's the good guys, then they want us to experience this, to struggle with it and grapple with it, so that we can ultimately transcend that binary three-dimensional thinking and start having a very different type of conversation. And, ultimately, within most Patriot circles, that's pretty much the way it is now. I mean, people aren't just accepting things at face value, the way they used to. People are questioning everything. I mean, to the point where, sometimes it gets to be overwhelming, honestly, because your head starts spinning when you realize that, you can't really trust anyone. You can't really trust anything. You can't really be 100% sure about any sort of analysis. And it gets maddening. I experienced this right along with you. And that's, again, why sometimes I just kind of have to step away and take a break. And usually what ends up happening is that, I get a little bit of clarity. I always pray for it. But that clarity usually never comes in the form of, oh, this one's right and that one's wrong. It's usually something else is going on, and the Lord gives me some insights into what those things could be. Now, I'm not suggesting that I have any information or downloads that you don't have. I'm just, like I say, I'm giving people my honest opinion, my honest take on it. And people can let me know what they think. They can certainly accept it or not. People are going to have different opinions here. But the one thing I think that most of us agree on in the audience is that what's being presented to us, and I've talked about this many, many times, is 95% of it is just, it's contrived, it's weaponized, it's being used for some sort of a reason. It's either being weaponized against us or it's being weaponized against the enemy. And, we're sort of like collateral damage, in terms of, trying to confuse the enemy. Like a good example would be, the thing that goes in your arm. I mean, and in the same way that, people are debating the issue between General Flynn and Lynn Wood, people have been talking since the very beginning of how is it possible that Trump is out there pushing this thing and debating it and trying to figure out ways around their cognitive dissonance. And that's just the thing. We become so used to that cognitive dissonance. And on one level, it's a good thing because it's forcing us to change our way of thinking. It's forcing us to ascend and to get out of that thought prison. But on the other hand, it's also, I think, exhausting and it can be very overwhelming for people. I mean, overall, I think in the ascension process, we're healing, but we're also, part of the healing process. I mean, healing is never easy. I mean, anybody out there and I'm sure it's probably everybody, who's ever had a major injury, a major surgery, or, something that's really sent shockwaves through their body, that it takes you months, if not years, to be able to ultimately get yourself back to where you need to be. And so, I guess you could look at that even from a societal level, and maybe that's part of the reason why there are many people out there suggesting that it's going to take us years as a society to be able to fully recover from this period that we're living through right now. And I think that in some ways that's very true. I mean, I don't think that we're going to be suffering and in misery and all that stuff for years. In fact, I think just the opposite. I think that we're going to have a lot to celebrate very soon. And not years, but months, in my view. Hopefully less. But, certainly there's going to be a period that we go through that's going to be hellish, like we all know. I think it's going to be sort of a mixture of heaven and hell for us, because on the one hand, it actually is going to be hellish, what we're going through. But on the other hand, the event's finally going to be here, and all of us know that heaven awaits on the other side, or as close to heaven on earth as you could possibly get. And it's like I talked about the other day. I would not be doing this, as God is my witness. I would not be doing this if I didn't believe in that. And I would not be selling anybody, a bag of goods over here, selling anybody a pipe dream if I didn't believe in it. And I'll be the first one to admit when I'm wrong, folks. But, the one thing about me that, I don't operate on that level. If something doesn't feel right, I'm not perfect, but, I have a certain level of integrity. I'm not going to just sell you a bunch of BS that I don't believe in. I wouldn't do it. Even if I could profit off of it, like, Charlie Ward said, like somebody came up to me and said, hey, here's a few $1 million. You want to sabotage the Patriot movement, however much money they offer me. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And that's one of the things, I recognized about myself kind of early on. Don't get me wrong, folks. I love money just the same way everybody does in terms of the freedom that it can give you. But I recognized very early on that, that was not what I was motivated by. And it's still to this day, isn't. And there are certain things that money can't buy. And one of them is integrity. And without integrity, if you're somebody like me, you can't live with yourself. And if you can't live with yourself, what the hell good is the money anyway? Now, obviously, there are a whole bunch of people out there who have no problem taking that money and doing that. I'm not one of them. I'm doing this because it's something that I'm passionate about. For the first time in my life, I've never done a podcast before. That's funny because some people, they ask me that or suggest that. I've never done a podcast before. This is something I started a little more than 10 months ago, folks. It's just a genuine, organic ordinary American with a voice who wants to know the truth and is passionate about connecting with people who feel the same way and navigating this journey together and trying to get at the truth. And for me, what it's all about, my guiding principles are I want to be loyal to the truth and I want to be loyal to the people. I'm not, certainly I'm in general, I'm a very respectful person and I usually get along with most folks, but I'm not the type of individual who's looking to, social climb or get, rub elbows with certain people. That's not what I'm about. I'm doing this because I am one of you and we're in this together. And sure, there are going to be people out there who are going to hear this and still say, yeah, whatever, you're CIA, you're deep state. I mean, I've heard it all, folks. I mean, it's laughable to me knowing the truth about who I really am. In fact, if people knew the truth about who I really am and what I really do for a living and how ordinary it is, I mean, it'd be hysterical when they hear all these things that people have suggested. People have suggested I was Robert David Steele. People have suggested I'm General Flynn. I don't know. It seems like kind of a negative pattern there. I don't know. I just kind of realized that. But people have said these things. It's like, no, I'm not that. I'm not that person. I'm just me. And I just started this journey because I just wanted to connect with all of you. I think deep down inside, my spirit was craving it. And how lucky I was to be able to connect with all of you. And certainly how lucky was I that I was able to connect with Gene Decode so early on, and how gracious he was to come on to the show. And gosh, folks, how many people, out there listening right now found my show because of Gene? Probably a great amount. More often than not, I hear that from folks that they were searching for Gene videos or they discovered me through Gene. I have just so much respect for him. It's like, there's so many insiders out there. And, I talk about the ones that I respect. Could I be wrong about certain people at the end of the day? People criticize me for listening to Charlie Ward. They criticize me for listening to Simon Parks. They criticize me for listening to Juan O'Savin. They criticize me. I even have people criticizing me for listening to Gene. And, you can't please everybody, folks. I'm sorry. Hey, I listen to who I listen to. I believe in what I believe in. You're entitled to your opinion. And again, if I'm wrong at the end of the day, I'm man enough to admit it. But at this point in time, these are the voices that I resonate with. But, getting back to Gene, he provides such a broad spectrum analysis. That's one of the things I love about Gene. There's almost no topic that he's not an expert on and he can't talk about and teach new things and just in the process of telling us what he knows. We learn so much new information. And how many people out there? Are there any other insiders that talk about what's going on in space, what's going on underground, the history of where we really came from, religion, the dumbs, child trafficking, adrenochrome? I could go on and on and on. Gene's an expert in all of these areas, and he talks about all of these different things. That's why I love having him on the show. It's why everybody loves listening to him. In fact, I was listening to his most recent interview with Nicholas Benyamin. And, they were talking about the mystery, I guess you could say, surrounding Kirsten W. And this is just another example. It's like of a situation where there's all types of mystery. There's all types of unanswered questions, and people are wondering, who she really was. Was she really a bad guy or, a black cat? Well, Gene explains that Kirsten was, and I didn't know any of this, by the way, about her background, that she was born into a fabulously wealthy family that is, part of one of the highest ranking orders in the Leaf family called the Hand, which is the enforcement arm, no pun intended, of the Leaf family. It's called the Hand. And I guess her father was a member of that. And I think this is where all of the accusations come from, that she was really a spy. She was really working for the CCP. But the way Gene explains it is that she was really kind of a quadruple agent. That the CCP thought that the easiest way, I guess, to explain it, and Gene can do his best when he comes on, but the easiest way I think to explain it is, at the end of the day, is that the CCP thought that Kirsten was ultimately working for them. And that was really, she was trying to sabotage the alliance when in reality, she was doing the opposite. And she was very, very deeply involved in this espionage, really. And that more or less, once the CCP and the cabal became aware of what she was really doing, and she was dumping all of this high-level intel, in Gene's words, they got pissed. And they got to her and they gave her a shot. They gave her an injection. Now, he also explored the possibility, and to be very clear, and those of you who listen to the interview, you know he was very clear about this. It's only a possibility. He's not asserting that this is true, but he talked about the possibility that maybe Kirsten perhaps could be in the custody, let's just say, of the Alliance, or working with the Alliance, perhaps even off planet, that maybe her death was faked. And, there was all types of, stuff that came out about Kirsten maybe being a man. And Gene talked about that. He talked about how wealthy she was and really her background and her history. So for me, it was a really, an eye-opening experience to learn all of this information about her, but that I didn't know any of it. But, it's good to know that my instinct about her was correct, which is that, she was working for us. She was one of the good guys. And, I firmly do believe that. And, it's great. It was great to hear Gene talk about that because, when he provides intel, I pretty much always believe what Gene has to say. And it feels good too, because, it's kind of like, it validates what I felt about Kirsten and, the tribute that I gave to her on my channel. And even though I never met her, I had hoped to. And I always thought that she was one of the good guys. So I think that having Gene on is going to be excellent. I know he's probably going to want to say a few words about Kirsten as well. He indicated that, when we were talking through email, I actually told folks that I had learned about her passing. I just happened to be in the middle of an email conversation with Gene trying to set up a time for our next interview. And he told me before I had even gone online and seen the news that she had passed. So, he's taken this very, very hard. And, I know he's going to want to say a few words about Kirsten as well. So I certainly welcome that. And also, of course, I welcome all of his new intel. I'm very curious because it was another interview. It was like a Q&A session he was doing where he was asked about the flashes of light, that we've seen so much of, coming from the White House. What's that all about? And more or less his response, I don't remember what exact words he used, but it was kind of like, deep, deep stuff or something along those lines, indicating that it was, or at least it seemed to me, he was implying that, he knew exactly what was going on, but was not at liberty to talk about it. And, Gene's got a lot of contacts. There's a lot of things about Gene that I'd still want to know. I mean, I still want to know if he goes off planet. There's so many other things that I want to ask him. But he couldn't talk about that. But I did hear other reports that this could possibly be some micro detonations in order to weaken the structure of the White House ahead of a planned explosion. I think part of what's fueling that idea is also the concrete wall that reportedly is to keep debris from flying into the street. And with all this military buildup, folks, I mean, it seems inevitable that something's going to go down. And given the filth and the depravity and the wickedness that we know took place underneath the White House, well, like that people have been talking about lately, drain the swamp wasn't just a campaign slogan. It was actually a battle plan. But I don't think they even knew how wicked and disgusting and evil it was under there. And it's got to go. I mean, there are certain structures, and Gene talks about this a lot. There are certain structures that are just so evil, and certain areas that such atrocities have been committed. And, not only that, I mean, just from a medical standpoint, a health standpoint, and there's Kuru down there. They have to burn the Kuru out of there. I mean, folks, we get so wrapped up in the timeline and thinking about the expectations and how things are going to unfold and how we want and how we're sick of it. And I get it, but sometimes it's good to just pause and to think about what is being encountered down there. I mean, there are human beings down there who are going down there with, of course, our non-terrestrial allies who are giving us the weapons and the tactics and logistics to actually fight this war. Because unlike other wars, like the Dulce Wars, we got our asses kicked because we didn't have any capacity to deal with what's down there. But this time it's different because we have help. But nevertheless, folks, we've got human beings down there rescuing other human beings from conditions that I don't even have words for, and depravity that goes beyond, I think, goes beyond human conception. I don't think that a human brain, I don't think that a human mind has the capacity to dream up these evils, to even conceive of them. And that's what's going on down there. I mean, the hybrids, the genetic experimentation that they've been doing. I mean, some of these pictures that I've seen, folks, will never, ever leave me. And this is just the beginning of the disclosure. This is just the drip. I mean, when this stuff really hits, and I sometimes I wonder whether or not they're actually going to, pull the faucet on full force when it comes to all this stuff. I don't know. Because, I mean, let's face it, folks, the stuff that's like not even half as bad as what we're talking about right now is enough to get people to kill themselves. Maybe some of you say, well, whatever, survival of the fittest, let them kill themselves. But I don't think that that's the right way to look at it. I think, ultimately, yes, I believe that the full truth needs to come out. But, this is why I question it. Because, yes, I do believe that. And I think it has to come out. But it's just so shocking and so horrifying that I think a lot of people aren't going to come back from it. And it could be possible that maybe the white hats know that, and maybe some of this stuff, it will be, let's just say, kept under wraps. I don't know. I mean, that's not what I want. Don't get me wrong. But I also don't want society to be so overwhelmed and broken that it can't come back. But I don't think that's going to happen because, again, I mean, I'm not in control of this plan. White hats aren't even in control, really. It's God's plan. And in my view, there are plenty of things that God has up his sleeve that the white hats don't even know, including the timing. Now, some people think that they know exactly when they're going to make their move, and that may be. But, somehow on a spiritual level, I think that God's involved here, and I think that they're waiting on certain things that are above their pay grade, let's just say. They're waiting on the right time. Now, that's not to suggest that I think God himself is whispering in the ear of Q or anything like that. I'm not trying to give anyone the wrong ideas necessarily. I mean, I don't know how this is happening, but on a spiritual level, I do believe, this is a spiritual war. Let's face it. And who are the top generals in this on the battlefield here? It's the devil and Satan, folks. The devil, well, excuse me. It's the devil and God. They're the ones who are sitting at the chessboard here. So is it really outlandish to think that, God is actually calling the shots here? No, absolutely not. How he does that and the way that he works, well, that's a whole different conversation. And that's something that I also think is beyond human comprehension. The Lord works in mysterious ways, but he always writes straight with crooked lines. And I know that it's going to only add to God's glory, that it's seeming more and more as if the enemy is just closing in around us, on the surface. If you're not listening to shows like mine, if you're not listening to the insiders, if you're not paying attention to what's actually going on out there, your perception has to be that, the noose is just getting tighter and tighter and tighter around our necks. In fact, there are a lot of people who do listen to me and other people like, other truthers out there, and they still feel that way. People are all over the map in terms of where they're at. And sometimes on any given day, that can change multiple times a day. That's the process that we're going through, folks. Like I was talking about, the healing process. It's a lot of back and forth, push and pull. It's healing and it's suffering at the same time. Because again, there are these different energies that are competing. And it's an energetic battle. It's a battle for consciousness. But it's a spiritual battle. And that's how I know that, we could sit here all day long. We could try to figure out, the greatest minds in the world are doing exactly that, trying to figure out exactly how this is going to play out. There's no way to do it. There's too many variables. There's too many situations. Like I've heard Gene talk about this, and only God has the type of mind that can hold all of these variables up there and all these potentials at the same time and lead and be able to make moves and counter moves and so on. But this is a battle that's been going on since the beginning, folks, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, well before any of us ever came along. And isn't it crazy that while that's true, it's also true that here we are. And we're in a position to be able to witness the most epic moment in history. And that moment is rapidly approaching. There's no two ways about it. You can feel it in the air. I mean, you don't even have to read the news anymore. You really don't. And when you do read the news and you do take a look at what's going on, it's more and more obvious what's happening here, folks. The noose is tightening, but it's not tightening around our necks. It's tightening around the necks of the Khazarian mafia all over the world, from Kazakhstan to Uruguay to what's very likely going to be Ukraine. Looks like that's imminent. And there are multiple different factions at play here, folks, multiple different alliances, as we know. And there's all types of confusion. There's all types of talk of controlled opposition, which, again, I'm not suggesting doesn't exist. But I am suggesting that it's not necessarily in the manner and form that we think it exists. So keep the faith, reserve judgment. I mean, obviously, I'm not here to tell people what to think and what to believe. I'm here to tell you what I think and believe. But my advice to folks, fellow patriots out there, is to, reserve judgment. Try to resist falling into that binary thinking pattern, that three-dimensional box, and try to always consider a different possibility. And I guarantee you, the more that we do that together, the closer we'll get to the truth. And the more we'll transcend this matrix together. All right, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know in the comments. As always, please do everything you can to support my work. Make sure you subscribe to my different platforms. I'm on BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, and Podbean. Please keep me in your prayers, and I will be back soon with another episode, God willing. Thank you for listening. God bless. Patriot out.